So, that field's done. That field's done. We missed a couple of little bits. This is the other field that we need to do, but it's a growth stage behind these two. So I've got to wait till that goes up one stage. These two are a growth stage behind that one. And also, turn the cloud off. One more layer of fertilizer on this one will be good. This one still needs two. And that's because this is a grass field, so when we ploughed in the grass provided a level of fertilizer. This field needs to be cut now. So we'll get onto that later today, as you can see, covered in weeds, but nothing I can do about that. Meanwhile, there's no contracts that we can do, primarily because wetness. We could do the transport contracts, but frankly not particularly worth it. We will attach that weight. We'll lift the forks and go fetch ourselves a bale. I think we only need one. So the green hay bales are the ones we bought from the store, and the yellow ones are all the home-produced bales. Yeah, I'm using pallet forks for this. I'm using pallet forks for this because we don't have any bale spikes at this time. Okay. Is there the room? No. There is. So we did the water. We can do this. And the sheep will be good for another day and a half fish. It's still early morning. Probably yeah, that's only 13. So take that, put that back in the barn. So even when the sheep are down to a third of their food left, they're still not using an entire bale of hay. And I'm not going to be... there's no need to be worried about how much hay we have right this minute, as far as our sheep flock is concerned. If I go and get some cows, we are going to need more hay. As mentioned earlier, I'm only going to feed them hay while they're getting settled in, and then once they're settled and producing, we'll improve their feed accordingly. Right now, oops. Put this away. Go get the mowers out. Forward a little. Just need to be close enough that we're still reminded that it's there and not attached whenever we get into the tractor. But for right now, that tractor is done. Took the long walk round. I believe the mower blades are over there. And which tractor shall we use? One's fully charged and ready to go. That one needs a service. Let's run that round to the shop. It's a problem I could really do with a couple of mid-sized tractors for some of this work, so that we're not putting so many hours on our big tractors. Big tractors are going to get ample use later in the year. Okay, I'll leave that there for now. We'll get the work done, and then worry about taking care of that later.
Welcome to the Challenger.
Welcome to Challenger. We're also going to need the windrower later. That's in the other bay. I did see that someone's done a mod of that Kuhn windrower and made it a multi-manufacturer model. And one of the options is the class. I think I've done this before and ended up crashing into the walls, but hopefully we won't do this time. Or maybe we will. Because this mowing kit is way too heavy for the Lindner to put away. So I might want to look for somewhere a little bit more open. No, I don't need to shut that. I'll just go. I may put... how's the sheep all doing? We only have 3/4 of a thing. So yeah, I might put it down with the Ivor Williams trailer in the hay barn sell point. So that's nice and open. That's a lot of weeds. I'm also wondering if weeders work when, because at the moment we know that you can't herbicide and fertilise in one growth stage. And obviously with the tight schedule we've got running here, that's kind of a problem. So this doesn't look very heavily grown, but it is ready to harvest, so we're all good. Let's move forward a little. I'll try not to knock the gate. Turn that on, and we're good for a quick run round the field. There we go. So as I said, this will be a silage cut. We'll be putting it all straight in the bunker. And I did get a delivery of a new piece of equipment today, which is a little undersized for this farm, but the equipment we're looking at is quite pricey, and we don't have the money to buy one out, or a larger one outright. So this job is probably going to take us most of the rest of the day now. While we're due for rain sometime, I haven't looked up when, because this is all wet grass, we're not going to lose any until midnight. Wet grass, or grass doesn't decay during rainfall. Hay does, straw does if it's left outside. Grass is fine. The only issue you might have is if you're trying to make hay and you have dry grass in the field. If it rains, you now have wet grass in the field, you're going to need a tedder to dry it out, and you have to wait until the ground is dry. So the little top right hand side of the screen, you've got a cloud without raindrops, that's the current weather. A cloud with raindrops, that's the predicted forecast for weather later today, probably within the next 8 hours. And then the little icon next to that looks like a plant growing out of the ground with a drop of water, and that indicates that the ground is wet. You have to wait until that icon disappears before you can ted dry wet grass to make it dry grass. That's why we're not producing hay with this cut. Even if I needed hay, this is not a good time to be cutting this. Because the ground is wet, and so we would be we're basically fighting a losing battle. And I found that out the hard way in Farm Sim 17. On our last cut there, the ground was wet, and I had a mowing train, so I had 3 tractors running along. The first one was cutting, the second one was tedding, and then the third one was that doesn't look good. Looks like we're yeah, it's starting to rain already. So as the tedder went over, it dried the grass, and then as soon as the grass hit the ground, it turned wet again. So that wasn't a great result. I think we'll gauge this weather as we go. Obviously this is just a light rain, so I'm not too fussed about what we're doing, but we can cut the grass while it's wet, and we can cut the grass while it's raining, so we'll take advantage of that for now. This is a heavy tractor and a heavy mowing kit. Kind of like a chrome big N as well, because that would get rid of our excessive usage on our heavy tractors. These are the only tractors we've got that will haul this kit at the moment. I think, sorry, good morning Hail Team, yeah, I think the government is doing what they think is best. I mean, in such situations, I do not think what they are doing is good for people or the country, but they've decided that they think it is. And it really comes down to what your opinion is about what is best for people. I mean, it's like, do you give a drug addict money or do you buy a drug addict food? Both of them help, but one of them is probably not the wisest idea, since if you just give them money, they're probably going to go out and buy more drugs. Whereas if you buy them food, that's what they need. Now, most people would say, oh, give them money so they can buy food. Yeah, but they won't. So it's matters of opinion. Should the government give everybody a load of money for free for just sitting around doing nothing? Or should the government go to all the utilities and mortgage companies and everyone else and say, we'll cover your bills for the month? And, in return, you don't bill your customers for a month. I mean, okay, bailing out the airlines. We're going to need airliners airlines when this is all over. And they have large payrolls and large equipment that needs to be looked after. You don't have storage for all those planes, and it's not their fault this happened. Same with restaurants, movie theatres and everything else. It's not their fault they closed. The government told them to. And they couldn't plan for it. Well, quite. Although you could... See, the thing is you could transfer what your 401k is invested in, reallocate the resources. But again, not a good idea. Most of the time, the only people who are guaranteed of getting hurt on a roller coaster is those that get off halfway down. Unfortunately, most of us have realised that the stock market was in freefall way too late, and if you sold, you locked in your losses. Personally, I think if you have cash sit on it, and when this thing bottoms out, if you're not investing everything you're allowed to in your 401k, do it. Because the market is going to be effectively bargain time. I mean, they were saying all of the gains that happened in the stock market since Trump became president have been wiped out as of this week. But the gains after the crash in 2008, I think, were basically recovered within less than a year. So less than a year after all this clears out, all our losses are gone. So if you invest when the market is bottomed out, you're going to realise those gains, all of them, or a lot of them. Yeah, if you're going to retire within the next few weeks, then it's a bad time for you. If you're not planning to retire for a few years, right now is a great time to look at the market and say, I need to make plans to put some money into that. But my personal opinion, don't do it right now, because the market is still in free fall. You don't know what's going to happen until you get the bottom. Follow the rule. Buy low, sell high. Selling now, you're heading into a low. You've lost the highs. And if you're putting money in your 401k every month, then what you buy today, or what you sell today, is 30% less value than what you bought last month. That's a recipe for being poor. Not having sufficient in your retirement. Disclaimer, I'm not a retirement specialist or financial advisor. True. Storm. The rain is getting a little heavier. I think we've got time to finish this. Get back to the yard. Put it all away. Possibly even get out the windrower ready for later on when the rain stops. But that was the problem with the travel asset release program back in 2008. The banks were in trouble, so the government gave in a bunch of money, and rather than helping the economy, they bought their competitors. So a lot of the tiny regional banks disappeared and were absorbed by the likes of Bank of America and Chase, which gives us, the consumer, less options. Usually what happens when the government gets involved in financials. They don't know what they're doing. They unbalance the system, and rather than things ending up better, what usually ends up happening is the big companies buy their competitors, so they don't have any competition anymore and become more of a monopoly. Was it in early 90s the telecom company got broken up because the telecom company was a monopoly, and now 20 years later we're back to very few telecom companies again. When I came here in 2000, or just 1999, my telecom provider was SBC. SBC is now AT&T. And so a lot of other telephone companies are now all engulfed in AT&T. But AT&T is no longer a monopoly because you have the cell phone companies and the cable companies. We have Comcast, and if I could find our telephone, I could plug that into our modem and use Comcast as a landline. So AT&T doesn't have the monopoly it had back in the 1990s. I worked back when I was in the UK. I ended up working as an IT consultant for who was it? A distillers and vintners company. I can't remember which one it was, because I then ended up about a year later working for their competition. But at the time, it was United Distillers and Vintners, and Guinness merged, and that merger resulted in them owning over 90% of the gin market. And so they had to sell some of their gin labels so as to more evenly distribute production of gin between multiple companies. Now, as it was, the competitor I went to work for about a year later bought one of the gin labels. Monopolies are bad, and government getting involved in, government forcing big companies to break up usually just ends up making lots of small, weak companies, and then the best of them is going to buy all the competitors back up again. And unless there are rules in place to prevent that. As I said, right now, because there are so many telecom operations, not just AT&T. AT&T are no longer a monopoly. Same happened with the oil companies. It used to be Standard Oil way back when, and government regulations split them up into multiple companies, and we still have multiple oil producing companies. But not as many as there were after the monopoly split. Anyway, as I said, I'm not a financial advisor and I didn't do finance at school. Follow the general rules of Saturday Night Live. Don't buy stuff you can't afford. Don't buy stuff you don't need. Just because it's on sale doesn't mean you need it. If it's on sale and you need it, buy it now, because you'll save money. But if you were never intending to buy something, just don't go out and buy stuff that you don't need. You can't afford. Okay, well, this weather's getting a little bit worse. I've only got a small patch down at the bottom there, so let's that. Whoops. Push the right buttons and end up cutting the right bit of grass there. So stream today, I have no additional pressure on me since Mrs. Ose is out of town. We'll go until I'm hungry. Go and see what I've got to eat. That's another wonderful thing that's going on at the moment. Oh, you should make sure you've got enough supplies for 2 weeks. Okay. Stop hoarding. Okay. Not that I can go to the store and buy enough for 2 weeks, because the store doesn't have 2 weeks of food. And I don't have storage for 2 weeks of food, because we just moved in here. If I buy food that fits in with the storage, then I can't unpack all the boxes and get out the pans and the stuff that I need to cook the food. So that's the toughest. There we go. That's the front one done. That's the back one. Oh. I must admit, I haven't checked electronic skills. I ended up at what was it? Lowe's on Thursday, because we got our new desks delivered. Although that was fun. Delivery truck turns up and